How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys, Alex and Ryan. So we have resorted to prospect breakdowns and talking about the future of this team because the present looks like if you went headfirst into a spear thrown by a Spartan. It just looks like death. It looks like hell. I mean, even Aaron Boone last night said something along the lines of, we aspire to be the Atlanta Braves batting order. We aspire to have the rugged and balanced nature of the Atlanta Braves batting order. So, throwing his batting order under the bus, saying, yeah, we're just not good enough, basically, is what he said. He's right. Probably one of the more factual things Aaron Boone has said this year, and at least acknowledging the fact that we just are completely outmatched. I mean, Clark Schmidt, I feel bad for the guy. He invited 50 of his family and friends to watch him, and he got blown the fuck out in 2.1 innings. Excuse my language, but that was the only way to put it. He got blown the hell out. 2.1 innings, bullpen game, 8 earned runs, 9 hits. I mean, what more can you say? This Yankee team, you're seeing, we get beat by the Chicago White Sox, we get beat by bad teams, and, we get destroyed by teams that are great. Like, the Atlanta Braves are a powerhouse. They're ridiculous. They're amazing, and we stand no chance. And if that's any further indication that the Yankees need to start looking toward building for the future, calling up prospects, seeing what we have here, that is it. That is what we need to be doing right now. So we want to talk about a young prospect today who you guys probably don't know much about, but you're about to learn a lot about him because this is a guy who has been dominating this year. More than any other prospect, offensively, this kid might actually be our best offensive prospect when it comes to the production he's been putting on the baseball diamond this season. And to give you some context, he started the year in low A, guys. He started the year with Tampa. He spent 10 games in Tampa. Then he played 15 games in high A Hudson Valley, and he was promoted again. He's been promoted 2 times this year. And now he's in double A, and he's primed to be promoted to triple A. He's doing that well. So we're going to break him down for you. His name is Ben Rice. If you haven't heard of him, you're about to learn about a player who has a lot of promise and what we think he could do at the next level, and if he should be promoted sometime soon. So, Ryan, before we dive into Ben Rice, what he has to offer, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I actually think this is going to be a pretty fun episode because end of the day, the major league team has kind of been disappointing, but I think the minor league team has been the complete opposite, or at least the minor league affiliates, right? You have 2 playoff teams in Somerset and Hudson Valley. That's already been clinched. Obviously, you have storylines like Drew Thorpe. Now he's in double A, and, again, he made my job super easy that day because as the board operator for Binghamton, all I had to do was just, 5 minutes have passed, time to go to commercials. He was that efficient, that clean, but his teammate and a guy who hit a 3-run home run in that game, Ben Rice, has been phenomenal. And, obviously, when we're talking about 24 years old in double A, you have to grade on a curve. You have to be a lot more strict in what you're grading for here. We're talking about a guy who's 23, 24, even 25 in some cases in double A, but there are ways to be 24 in double A and still have a successful season. Just because you're a 24-year-old double A doesn't make you a bad prospect. It just means that, again, you kind of have to get the ball rolling a little bit, and that's exactly what he's done. Now, this is just his double A data, right? So I figured high A and low A, maybe that's just him being a lot older than the other guys. He was a college pick out of the 2021 draft. Maybe he's just ahead of them, right? And that's just what it is. But in double A, now you start facing guys who are major league caliber, right? Last year, Anthony Volpe was in double A, right? Now he's a major leaguer. There are plenty of examples this year, and last year, I think the most notable one, Julio Rodriguez, straight up just skips double A. There are major leaguers in double A, and I think that's important for us to note. But in terms of the plate discipline stuff, his out-of-zone swing rate is in the 87th percentile. That's a 27.1%. 63.4% zone swing percentage. That's right around league average for double A, 50th percentile. And that's important because guys who are very passive at the plate tend to struggle to be aggressive in zone, but he's league average in that regard, and that's good. That's a nice mix you like to see. Patient, but able to identify when you have to swing. And when he does swing, 20.1% whiff percentage, that's in the 88th percentile for double A hitters. And then his 468 weighted on base average, now that's offensive production, that's WOBA right there. It's in the 100th percentile. So in terms of straight offense, he is as good as it gets, if not the best hitter in his circuit right now. So, really, this is an advanced part of the minor leagues. People talk about the jump to double A as the most difficult one for a prospect. But Alex, when I look at these numbers, when I read these numbers, I don't see struggling. I don't see, this is a big challenge. I see this is a guy who's taking on dudes who could be major league capable or could be major league hopefuls in the next year or so, and he's taking them to the cleaners. He's thrashing them, right? He's not just hitting decent, he's thrashing them. So, the Yankees who don't historically speaking, have a great history of promoting prospects aggressively, it's kind of something they're going to have to do. The one time they really did it was 2017, 2018, and that worked really well for them. So, I wonder if they tried again. And Ben Rice, left-handed guy, he can catch, he'll play some first base. I know that Rizzo is working his way back, so that, I'm not saying he has to necessarily be up today, but obviously that's going to complicate things. Maybe you view him as like a backup catcher kind of situation who plays other positions. Blake Sable of the Giants is kind of a really good example of this. They have Patrick Bailey, who's one of their top prospects, he's been blowing it away at the catcher position. He's been great framing wise. They have Sable as the backup. He plays left field on other days, so play some other positions. I think the Yankees get creative, do something like that, and I think that'd be a really nice addition to the lineup. Even if he's just a 105 to 110 WRC plus hitter, just a guy who can hit right-handed pitching is kind of nice for a team that this year has really struggled to hit right-handed pitching.
I mean, look, Ben Rice is a really interesting prospect, and for what it's worth, we're going to get him on the podcast. I'm talking to him on Instagram right now, and really, really good guy, and he's excited, and he's like, sounds like fun. So we're going to get you his story. We're going to learn about his journey. He was a 2021 June amateur draft pick. I believe it's 12th round, if I'm not mistaken. So he's like a late round guy who's becoming a really solid player for the Yankees in their farm system. One of the things the Yankees failed to do miserably is hit with runners in scoring position, hit with 2 outs, and really just get on base. This is a player, again, I want to reference the fact that, we don't know what he'll be at the major league level, but he's been consistent throughout each level, so, we're hoping he can maintain that level of efficiency. But with 2 outs, runners in scoring position, he's hitting 360 with a 556 OBP, a 1.436 OPS. So this is a guy who shows up in big moments. You mentioned that 3-run homer he hit a couple weeks ago, or a couple days ago, even when Drew Thorpe had that ridiculous, scoreless outing. He's been showing up in those big moments all season. And this is a guy who right now is hitting 342 with a 422 OBP, 696 slugging percentage, and almost basically a 200 WRC plus. So the 200 WRC plus indicates he's 100% better than the average AA player. So you tell me, seems like a pretty good prospect. The one thing, Ryan, that really stands out to me, though, is something that we talk a lot about some of our top prospects, Jason Dominguez, Everson Pereira, even Anthony Volpe. Is there an Estevan Florial, even back in the day when he was considered, a guy that we actually wanted to use? Was their strikeout rate? They had strikeout rates 25% and up. Some of them 30% and up. But Ben Rice, guys, this is a player who has a really low strikeout rate. In high A this year in Hudson Valley, he had a 14.7% strikeout rate. And then in Double A right now, he has a 17.8% strikeout rate. So we're talking about swing discipline, talking about chase rates. We're talking about really good numbers in when it comes to just identifying what a pitch is and what to do with it. And he's never had a walk rate below double digits. His 10% walk rate right now is the lowest it's ever been, which is a really good sign. He's patient. He waits for the pitches he likes to see, and he's a lefty, and he's got really good power. He's hit 7 homers in 20 games, guys. This is a player who could transition and make a nice impact with the Yankees. And look, like you said, 24 years old. He's a little bit older, but I'll tell you this right now. Basically our entire major league team is older. We have a lot of guys 30 plus years old that we're depending on. 35 years old if you're at DJ LeMahieu, or 37 years old if you're Josh Donaldson, who's obviously going to be leaving this team. 24 is not old. He is primed to become a decent player on this team, or at least a contributor in some ways. The question is, where do you use him defensively? You kind of referenced this a little bit earlier. Where do you use a guy like Ben Rice defensively, right? Because he's basically a catcher by trade, but he's been a little bit of a DH. He's been a first baseman. Maybe you have him as an outfield support for what it's worth. You run out Jake Bowers in the outfield, you're getting really bad defense. IKF, below average defense. Billy McKinney, below average defense. Giancarlo Stanton can barely run at this point in time. What are you really losing if you give Ben Rice an opportunity in the outfield? We had Matt Carpenter playing outfield innings last year, guys. For God's sake, there's not much worse than Matt Carpenter in the outfield. He could barely run. So when you're looking at Ben Rice, Ryan, where do you see his long-term position kind of unfolding here? I think that catcher, it may be a long shot. We have a lot of catchers, even better defensive ones than him, in terms of framing, whatnot. I like Carlos Narvaez as a guy. We've talked about Augustin Ramirez. It seems like they might want to go in that direction, or even Austin Wells, who's I still don't think they see him as a long-term catcher, maybe a first baseman, maybe a corner outfield guy. Where do you think that Ben Rice is going to make a name for himself defensively?
Yeah, so again, kind of an interesting situation, right? The Yankees have a lot of prospects at the catching position that are kind of ahead of him on the depth chart. Augustin Ramirez has kind of eaten into his catching innings. So, not saying that they don't view him as a catcher, but I wonder if they think they can even get him the reps at this point, which is it's an unfortunate thing, right? I think there's a world where he figures it out as a catcher. Really the big thing that he struggles with is his arm. Like he struggles a lot when it comes to throwing runners out. If we look at what we have publicly available to us on Baseball Prospectus in terms of minor league framing data and like catching data and all that stuff, it's very limited. I want to clarify that. But he does have 0.3 framing runs this year. It was negative 0.2 at high A, 0.3 at double A, 3.9 last year at A ball with Tampa. Last year, much better framer than this one. I imagine a lot of that has to do with the consistency at the position. Like this year, he only has like 1,200 attempts or 1,200 pitches received. Last year, he was totaling like 3,700. So that's a massive gap in terms of, workload and all that. So I guess that kind of affected things. But his throwing runs have consistently been in the negative. So I imagine that's the thing the Yankees are worried of. But there's nothing really here that stands out as too bad, as in like, oh, this is so bad that he can't catch ever. But more so, I guess it's just a lack of reps available for him. But as you mentioned, could they throw him in the outfield? He's certainly more athletic than your average catcher if you're just looking at straight like stolen bases, which unfortunately is kind of the most we're going to have in terms of speed data for prospect at this point. He has 8 stolen bases this season in about 45 games. So I assume he's a faster guy. I assume he's athletic enough to play the outfield. As you mentioned, Matt Carpenter played out there. I'm pretty sure Ben Rice can. And you're just thinking about moving him around the diamond and just getting his bat in the lineup. And I think that's the important thing here. You want to get that bat in the lineup, right? You want to kind of see what you have here. And one thing that you mentioned, you talked about, okay, a lot of guys here struggle with strikeout rates, and a lot of guys have struggled with, whether it's plate discipline or whatever. These are all flaws that you expect young players to have, right? And one of the perks of Ben Rice being an older guy is that you're going to expect that he comes up and makes a major league impact a lot quicker than, a guy like Anthony Volpe, who struggled for the first 2.5 months of the season, was really, really, really bad, but then picked it up because you make in-season adjustments. And I guess that you assume that Rice wouldn't have to, or wouldn't have to make that drastic of an adjustment. But the big thing here outside of the contact rates is his batted ball sprays. He has a 30.6% line drive rate in Double A. That's massive, right? The ground ball rate it's low this year. The ground ball rate is down. We're seeing a better distribution of elevated contact. And when I see the line drive rate shoot up more than the fly ball rate, what that tells me is we're not seeing like a lot of pop-ups and a lot of infield fly balls. What we're likely seeing is just a guy figuring out how to generate more line drives, and that's led to a lot of power. He's at 7 home runs at Double A in 20 games. He has more RBIs than games played. I know RBIs really isn't that important of a stat, but it's just a cool thing to say. And end of the day, the Yankees, they're one game over 500, right? Like the Braves are throttling us. Is there really anything you're going to learn from the current vets that are on the team, right? Like how many guys on this team do you view as like, yeah, these are guys we need to develop and keep playing so that we have a better version of them next year? I talked about Johnny Burrito's sweeper. I tweeted out this morning on the Fireside Yankees account about the changes Volpe made with his stance and kind of like how, the offensive numbers have gotten better. Those are two things that are going to help you next year, right? If Ben Rice comes up and he figures out something in that swing, it's like, okay, these are the things I struggle with. These are the things I'm good with. That's good. Great. I know Clark Schmidt got throttled yesterday, but you can't sit here and tell me that being in the bullpen last year didn't help him figure out some things that he's carried into starting this year. So, major league experience, it is important, right? And you have an opportunity. You have 2 months essentially where you can get these guys reps, and the entire fan base is going to understand. Literally every single one of us are going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. And you get to kind of figure out what you have a little bit. The Yankees are in a weird spot where they're going to have a lot of parts of their lineup that they're going to want to look to get better at. And if you can close some of those gaps with internal guys, you look at like Pereira and Dominguez as guys that like in the next year or so you hope will help you out. But if you can, close some of those gaps with internal guys, now when a Juan Soto, let's say, becomes available, you have 3 or 4 guys who are making, league minimum or, are arbitration or whatever it may be, are cost-controlled guys in your lineup, and now you can afford a Juan Soto. You get what I'm saying? So ultimately, you got to be able to develop young talent because it allows you to have cost-controlled pieces everywhere around the diamond. And most importantly, this team needs to get a little younger, a little more athletic. And I think a guy like Ben Rice, it could be a win for stat line scouting. I know this isn't the traditional way you scout, where it's just you just go and watch games, but when you look at the numbers, they're good. And sometimes a guy just produces, and sometimes a guy just hits. And Ben Rice might just be a guy who just hits, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the goal here is like when you're looking at what the Yankees need to do now, it's the youth movement that we've been kind of hammering home the last couple of weeks. And, right now, there's no better time than the present. I think that right now they should promote him to AAA. They should get him 10, 15, 20 games and call him up for the last like couple games of the regular season. We have 43 games left, guys. Like, you could call him up to AAA, give him 10, 15 games. If he hits consistently, just promote him. Like, see what he's got. He's 24 years old. What's the point in not doing it? We need to see what the future holds. And if I was Hal Steinbrenner right now, I'd be looking at my team saying, like, the Braves are going to if we ever made it to the playoffs, we would get freaking destroyed. We get castrated in the playoffs. So, when you're looking at what the Yankees really need to do, is they need to see some of these older prospects. He's Rule 5 eligible in the winter. You need to make sure that you know what he can do in the future at a higher level. So he's gonna be 25 next year. Like, it's time. Like, it's time to start elevating some of these older guys that are kicking ass through the system a little bit more expeditiously, and they have been this year with him. He's been in low A, he's been in high A, and he's been in double A. Keep it going. Build off that momentum. Don't stifle this. The Yankees have a really bad problem with when prospects are actually hot. They don't promote them sometimes, and they just sit them there, like Austin Wells, for example. And then they get cold, and they're like, and it's probably a confidence thing a lot of times. They somehow manage to destroy the confidence of these players at a rate that's almost like incomprehensible to consider. So when it comes to Ben Rice, he's 20 games in Double A. Promote him, give him 15 games in Triple A, see if he plays well, and then call him up without any service time implications and see what he can do. Lefty bat, have him play first base, put him in a corner outfield spot, have him play catcher for a couple games, see what he's got. I don't see what the problem is at this point. Like, we're the season's over. Like, we're done. We're toast. So, like, why not start to actually leverage the guys who have some promise in the future and see what we can do in terms of preparing? Because if we know, like, if Ben Rice comes up, Ryan, and he kicks ass, and we're like, okay, like, this is an element we didn't anticipate having. Next year during spring training, you include him with the process of thinking like he could be a player that plays here in 2024 and makes an impact in a myriad of ways, whether it's a utility piece or whatever it might be. And he's young, and you give him the reps, and you give him the opportunities. The San Francisco Giants just called up one of their outfield prospects, and they're actually in a playoff spot. The fact that Yankees aren't doing that, and they're way out of a playoff spot, is almost mind-boggling. I mean, it is mind-boggling. It doesn't make sense to me a lot of the time. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts below on this, obviously, about Ben Rice, about some of these prospects that deserve to call up right now. I mean, Everson Pereira, he should be up at least by early next week. Like, there's no excuse at this point. So always happy to hear perspectives below. Make sure to like and subscribe as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.